Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome everybody to our October 2022 St. Paul's Speaker Series. Today's discussion is about honey production and management, and it's going to be hosted, or rather presented by Mr. Milimo Miyoba, who's a forestry technician in Masaiti, and accompanied by Ms. Catherine Zulu, who's a principal forestry officer in Lusaka as well. So without much ado, please, Mr. Miyoba and Ms. Zulu, go ahead with your PowerPoint. So we'll let you run through the PowerPoint, and then questions will come afterwards. But if you want to entertain questions in between, that's also fine. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much for the introduction. As alluded to, my name is Milimo Miyoba. I'm a forestry technician based at Masaiti district office. So this presentation is divided into two parts. I'll handle the production part, then Mrs. Zulu will handle the marketing and the other aspect. So my presentation is briefly broken down into the following. We're going to have some brief background data on what beekeeping is all about. We're going to look at benefits of beekeeping, types of beehives, beekeeping equipment, that's protective clothing, the other equipments that are used, setting up bee apiary, what are the requirements, management of bees in the apiary, when to harvest honey, how to harvest the honey, and lastly, how to extract liquid honey from the honeycombs. So basic data is beekeeping is an activity that is predominantly in this country, which has been more centered in the northwestern part of the country, where as of 2018, we had over 10,000 active beekeepers based in the northwestern part of the country. In these other provinces, we have a bit of scattered type of beekeeping activities. If you drive along the Lusaka Copper Belt route, you see a lot of honey being sold between Kabu and Kapiri. We have a few farmers that are doing a bit of beekeeping in Impika, Mbala, Chinsali. Of course, this information is up to 2018. That's the time when there was an SNV project. So that's when this data was basically collected. So we haven't had any recent data collected in the recent past. Then between 1970 and 1990, the beekeeping industry was mainly centered or supported by the Zambian government. That's the time when we had the Mwekera Honey Bee Factory, which was a fully fledged government department that was looking at beekeeping activities. Otherwise, by the time we got to the 1990s, with the restructuring that came in the government setup, the Mwekera Honey Factory was actually downgraded from being a department to a simple unit, which meant the government of the Republic of Zambia from 1990 actually withdrew its major support in the beekeeping sector. This led to the engagement of a lot of private sector players coming on board to fill up that gap which was left by the government of the Republic of Zambia in the beekeeping industry. That's the time we saw a lot of these companies coming up, trying to venture into beekeeping activities. Sorry, my slide is stuck a bit. Okay, oh, what's this now? Sorry, I don't know what's happening with my laptop. It seems to be a little bit misbehaving. Unable to. Apologies for that. Come on. Okay, I think it's back on. So now we're going to look at the benefits of beekeeping. Why should you and me engage in beekeeping activities? Firstly, it enhances vegetative cover. We are all complaining of the heat and reduced tree cover. When we engage in beekeeping, we are going to ensure that trees are managed well, because bees need the trees, need the flowering plants for them to survive. So as long as you're a beekeeper, you won't be interested in cutting down trees. You won't be interested in losing any vegetation around our locality. Beekeeping provides food. Honey is actually food. We can actually live on honey. It has all the nutrients that are required. Income generation. People make a living. We have companies like Forest Fruits in Zambia, a lot of other beekeeping companies that are able to make a living. Farmers are able to generate income through the sale of honey and other bee products. Honey and its products are actually used for medicinal purposes. If you get a burn, of whatever type, honey is actually the best to apply on a particular bin, and it works wonders. Creation of employment. Forest Fruits as a company has employed so many beekeepers. We have other beekeeping companies that have employed a lot of people, hence creating employment in the country. So from the photos above that you can see, we are seeing honey being used as food in that case. Management of the environment. We can see the forest cover that has been left intact. These are some of the bee products that we have. We have liquid honey. You've got beeswax. You can make candles out of that. We are looking at honey as a for medicinal purposes. That's a burn. Once honey is spread on that particular burnt part, no pathogens or bacteria can actually come to that particular injured part, allowing the wound to heal. And lastly, we create employment. A lot of people can come together and make a living out of beekeeping. We're going to look at two types of hives. As you venture into your beekeeping activities, you may choose to either use the traditional hives, that is in an event where you may not have the financial muscle to procure modern type of hives. So here we have, this is a log hive. This is, I think, should be a grass, a hive made out of grass. You have your back hive there. But now, then these are basically the modern types of hives. These are called frame hives. Now, when we look at all of these hives, they have certain characteristics which need to be upheld. Firstly, our hives should be strong enough to be able to hold the honey. They should not allow water to go in. So that's why you find like this particular one made out of grass, it has a plastic covering inside to ensure that water does not go in. These hives of ours should ensure that there is very little light. The hive inside should be dark. So whether you're using modern or traditional hives, those particular requirements have to be met. Then we come to beekeeping protective clothing. These are things that you need before you actually start your beekeeping activities. You need the beekeeping suit that you cover the whole entire human body to protect, bees are animals, and you can actually get stung. I mean, the honey is stored as their food. So basically, as human beings, all we do is we're actually stealing from the bees, because bees plan to say, well, whilst we have flowers, we are going to store the food. In times when we are running out of flowers, they'll feed on the honey, but as human beings, we actually go there to steal their honey. So just like any one of us, we may not allow a situation where a thief comes in and we simply sit by and allow them to pick whatever they need. So there'll be that fighting that will take place. So you need your protective clothing. You need your bee gloves. They should be able to cover you. Also, you need your veil. You also need the bee brush, a smoker, and a bee knife. A smoker, we use it to ensure that the hives are smoked just to reduce on the aggressive nature. I'm sure you can see from the photos on the screen. You have this beekeeper using a smoker, applying a bit of smoke to the hive to simply reduce on the aggressive nature of the bees. Yeah, the farmers in the full protective clothing. You have our gloves there. And these are basically the different types of bee knives that are used. So now we get now to the ground. As you pick up your place, you have procured all your hives, you have your beekeeping equipment. Now you need to pick a site for you to actually set up your hive. And that particular place is called an apiary. First things to look for, you need to ensure that you have enough flowering plants. Now, this does not mean you have only one particular type of flowering plant. Better you have a variety of plants that will flower at different times in the year. Because many other times that farmers would pick a particular area with maybe one particular species. So what you notice is the particular species will flower at the same time and the flowering season will end at a specific time. Hence, the bees might have a longer period of time without any food. So you need to ensure that the area that you select has a variety of species that preferably will flower at different times of the year. This will ensure that your bees have a sustained supply of nectar and pollen throughout the year. You need to ensure that availability of water in the particular area is good. Now, there's one funny thing about bees. Bees don't take clear water. So if you have a stream, you notice to say the bees would rather collect water that has a bit of a scent. So they would rather pick the frequent areas where maybe a few dead leaves have fallen and the water has a little bit of a scent. So bees don't actually require clean water. If you're going to provide water in drums or troughs, whatever, ensure that you put a bit of leaves into the water, which will be decomposing with time, and it also allows the bees to have where to settle as they take the water. Number 3, we need to ensure that our place, the apiary, is secure. You know, a human being is a difficult being. So we need to work on security, ensure that your place is not too close to your home or not too close to a residential area. Again, not too far. It should be a place where your hives are secure. You need to pick a slanting area to ensure that there's no waterlogging that takes place, mostly during the rainy season. And also pick an area that is free of bee parasites or pests. You know, these bees also have parasites that tend to attack them. As you can see from the photo there, we have the bee that is collecting nectar and pollen from that beautiful flower. This is what we meant when we said this is water that is provided in a trough. So put a bit of branches, even a bit of branches or leaves to ensure that the bees have where to settle for them to collect your water. Ensure that your hive is secured, your apiary is secured. Your area should not be too flat, but rather slanty to allow for water to slide during your rainy season. Now, once you pick those, once you meet those requirements, you need to ensure that your area, your apiary, is established. As you can see from this photo, we have a residential house there. So between this residential house and where the apiary is, at least you try to maintain a reasonable distance. Now, this is a bit tricky, more especially now that the population is actually increased. But bees being what they are quite vicious and dangerous. We don't advise keeping your apiary too close to your home. Where possible, try to maintain at least 300 to 500 meters away from your residential area, preferably. That will allow for the area to be quiet, away from human noise and human disturbance. That will maintain its natural environment, because if your apiary is too close to your home, the vehicles, the noise, that will disturb the bees, and ultimately that may affect the occupational rate of your hives in your particular apiary. So at least 300 to 500 meters is advisable. But what we have noticed is this distance is slowly being shortened due to the effects of human beings who tend to disturb and steal the hives. This photo is simply showing us how the hives are supposed to be laid out. Preferably, they should be about 30 centimeters off the ground. You can either use the blocks, like in this case, or you can use wooden stands. Now, someone might ask, why do we need to have the hives at 30 centimeters above the ground? First of all, we want to avoid the water splashes during the rainy season. We also want to avoid these pathogens that are moving on the ground from simply getting into our hives. So this is the standard. If you have got many hives, you may use this particular approach, but we have noticed to say there's a tendency among most farmers to actually hang the hives in trees. Now, hanging the hives and putting them in the stands have got their own advantages and disadvantages. When we use this method of having the hives on the stands, it makes management easier, because when they're 30 centimeters off the ground, as a beekeeper, you'll be able to access your hive without any hassle. When the hives are hung on trees, they'll be a bit laborious because you need to lower the hive from a particular hang tree. So those are issues that have debated and decided upon depending on the locality and the type of hives that one is using. So now your apiary is set, your beehives are there. You need to ensure that you bet them. What do we mean by betting? You get beeswax. I remember, if you remember, we saw beeswax. You need to ensure that you smear beeswax in our hive. That smearing of the beeswax will attract the bees to come into our hive. So when you have your apiary there, you have your smeared hives with beeswax, the bees will occupy your hives. So from that point now, what do you need to do as a farmer? Beekeeping, the beauty with beekeeping, if I go further, it gives us time to do other things. So once you've set out your apiary, all you need to do is walk around your hive, preferably in the mornings or late in the evenings, just to try and determine the number of hives that are occupied at a given time. As a beekeeper, this is business. You need to ensure that you record the date when your particular hive is actually occupied by the bees. It's very important as we'll go further. You need also to just monitor your hives for any parasites. You know, you might have termites that may attack your stand. You might have termites, or you might have rats that will go into your hive. So if you notice that your hives are not occupied, You open them just to check in case there are any parasites, in case there are any rats, in case there are any termites inside that are actually preventing your hive, the bees from occupying your hive. Once after a few weeks, you need to check your hives to ensure that you check on comb formation. Like this farmer here we are seeing, he's inspecting his hives to ascertain how the combs are being formed in the particular hive. This also tells us the strength of your colonies, how strong are they? We are seeing this farmer here trying to ascertain if the hive is occupied or not. So he's trying to see, obviously, he has not said maybe there are no bees for him to get this close, meaning there are no bees in this particular hive. So he's trying to check what is going on. This is an example of a pathogen that may actually affect your beekeeping activities. So we see here to say these bees did actually build the honeycombs, and in the process, a pathogen affected this particular hive. Hence, we are seeing this moth that has actually been built. And this automatically means the hives, the bees will not stay in here. They'll definitely fly away. So now, once you ensure that your hives are okay, the bees are performing well, you let them function. So for the first, when the hives are first occupied, you need to let them run for a full year. That is a full 12 months. You don't need to harvest anything. Now, why do we let the bees stay in a particular hive for a year? This will allow the bees to settle down in that particular area to avoid absconding. If we choose to harvest our honey within the first 6 months of the first occupation, the bees will be disturbed, and the chances that they will abscond are actually above 80%. So for the first year, we let the honeybees settle down, operate, store honey in that particular hive, at least for a minimum of 12 months. Thereafter, you harvest your hives every 6 months. So the first year, you let them run for 12 months. Afterwards, it will be every 6 months, you'll be able to harvest your honey. So at times, depending on the number of hives that you have as a farmer, you may split them into two. You may say, okay, maybe if you have, say, 100 hives, you may say the first 50 will harvest in June. The other 50 we're going to harvest in December. But if you have got a fewer number, you may harvest from the same hive, actually twice in a year. So how do we know that our honey is ready for harvest? If we look at this particular photo, we are seeing a frame that is fully kept. These are honey cells where the honey is stored. This is wax that is stored, that is covered on the honey cells. So the way the bees operate is they'll collect your honey, store it in the honey cells. Then after some time, they'll seal up those cells. The reason for sealing up the cells is to ensure that the enzymes. Now, see, let me digress a bit. Let me just try to explain how bees manufacture the honey. Bees have two stomachs. So when bees go to collect two products, they'll collect nectar and pollen. The pollen is what they use for their immediate energy purposes. And the pollen goes into the first stomach where the digestion takes place and allows the bees to have strength and energy to function. The nectar, when it's collected from the plant, it proceeds to a second stomach. Now, in that second stomach, when the bee goes back from the plant to the hive, it will regurgitate or vomit out that particular nectar that was stored in the second stomach. As it is vomited out, or regurgitated as we call it, it will contain certain enzymes that are found in the body of the bee. And it is those enzymes that react with the nectar to actually form the honey. So when bees store the honey in these cells, or the liquid honey as it were, the moisture content is quite high. So the reason for sealing up, like what we have seen here, this particular comb has been sealed up, is to allow for the reaction of the enzymes and the nectar, ultimately reducing on the moisture content of the final product, which is the honey. So by the time you harvest this particular comb, you notice to say the moisture content of this honey will be below 30% in terms of moisture. It will be more sugar than the honey, and that shows you to say the honey is ripe or ready for harvesting. So now when we get this particular frame, how we get it from the hive as it were, we need not to extract our liquid honey. So we have two methods of doing it. First of all, we can either use a scraping fork. That is the one we use to remove the wax from the honey, as you can see on this particular photo with the red scraping fork. Is simply removing this wax that was covering the cells. Then you can equally get, once you've done the scraping, you get your combs and you break them, then you squeeze them through a honey press. As you can see from these farmers here, they've gotten the honeycomb, crushed it, and then squeezing it in a honey press to extract our liquid honey. The other method you can use, that is the more industrialized way, is to get the frames, put them in this, it's called a settling tank. Then you spin the tank. As you are spinning the tank, all the liquid honey from the frames will actually spill over, as you can see in this particular photo. Then you extract your liquid honey. But of course, at commercial level, most of the farmers tend to use the honey press method. I think it's more economical and more user-friendly for the traditional setup. But both ways will ultimately give us good quality liquid honey. Now, people have argued to say the wax, when you get this wax, because this wax that we are seeing here is quite hardened. So if you don't expose this particular comb to a bit of heat, you may find the amount of honey, liquid honey that you get will actually be reduced, because much of it will actually be trapped in the beeswax. So we ensure that we warm the honey a bit, not heat, not cooking it. You get your comb honey that is crushed, put it in a plastic bucket, then put the plastic bucket into some warm water. The reason we do that is to simply warm the wax so that it is able to let go of all the trapped liquid honey in them. That is how we extract liquid honey. Ultimately, we are seeing a photo of liquid honey being bottled. So this whole particular process can actually be done even at farm level. It's something that can be done at farm level. So in summary, what I'm saying is, for us to venture into beekeeping, all we need is basically land with enough flowering plants, availability of water. This land doesn't need to be massive pieces of land. Even a hectare can do, provided you have a variety of flowering plants. Availability of water, the place should be secured. You're able to get the beehives. If you can't procure the modern frame beehives, you are able to use the traditional bark hives, which are easily available. But we go for the frame hives because we want to ensure that we maximize on productivity and quantity. We get more from frame hives than we would get from the traditional bark hives. In conclusion, all I would say is, I'll be very factual. Beekeeping is complicated if you don't have the interest. Beekeeping requires you to have the patience and love for nature. There is no single correct approach. Like I was saying, others will tell you we put the hives on, we hang hives in trees. Others will tell you, no, we need to ensure that we put the hives on stands. Others will tell you, no, we need to ensure that traditional hives are fast occupied compared to modern hives. So you use an approach that is ideal. That's why we say you need to continuously learn, understand the bees in your particular locality. The setup of your apiary, you need to master. Bees have a way in which they operate. They have bee lines, which they use for flying. So you need to know that bee lines, that you set your apiaries preferably along that line. Bees have a flying height. You need to understand the nature of their flying height so that you are able to place your hives within that range so that the occupation rate actually is enhanced. You need to learn from others. That is one thing, like we are doing, we are learning from each other. I'm not the expert, Ms. Zulu is not the expert, all of us are learning from each other, but at the end of the day, we need to share knowledge. Then at the end of the day, if you're just reading about this, you may never know. So get involved, have a beehive, make a few mistakes, then learn from there on. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Milimo. Obviously, learning from mistakes in beekeeping would mean being stung once in a while, right?
Sure.
But before Ms. Zulu comes in, Mr. Simfuko said he couldn't hear you. So I wanted to just get a feel of what everybody else's situation is. Are you guys able to hear Mr. Milimo's presentation?
Yeah,
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
Loud and
Loud
clear.
and
Okay,
clear.
so that means, Mr. Simfuko, the problem is on your device. And you'd fix that by going to if you're on your computer, going to the the sound button on the bottom left and select the built-in output or internal speakers. That should fix it. I don't know if you guys have any questions for Mr. Milimo before Ms. Zulu comes in. I always have a lot of questions, but
Yeah,
I'll
I've got a
wait until
question.
Sorry?
I've got a question.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Dixter.
Oh, Mr. Kalua,
Yes,
welcome.
thank you. On the availability of flowering plants.
Yes.
I heard him emphasize that there should be a variety of flowering plants where you want to do your beekeeping. But naturally in the bush, the natural vegetation, it's rare that you find that kind of setup and flowers that you have all year round. So is it possible to plant, if one is able to do that, to plant more plants that can give a variety of flowers?
Actually, that is exactly what we encourage. It's only that in Africa, we try to maintain our honey as natural from our natural Miyoba woodland. If you go to developed countries, you are actually able to market your honey based on the flavor. For example, if you are growing tomatoes, you may actually have your hives much if you are growing tomatoes in a greenhouse, you may actually place your hives within that particular greenhouse. So the bees will collect nectar and pollen from the same species. And you may find at the end of the day, the flavor of your honey that you get will actually be tomato flavored. If you want to, so it's actually advisable to introduce as many flowering plants as possible. You know, I'll say this, you may go to Southern Province, for example, where most of the trees have been depleted. We wouldn't say beekeeping can't be done. So we are encouraging farmers to grow plants, grow flowers. All we need is an area with enough flowering plants.
Okay.
That is all that is required.
Okay.
Yeah. But of course, maybe in addition, what I would say is, when we look at our flowering plants, there are those plants that produce flowers that are mainly pollen-centered and those that are mainly nectar. So as a farmer, you need to be able to understand, to say flowers come in different types. You need those, basically what you need are plants that will give you both nectar and pollen. Because if you're going to have an area with plants that are mostly pollen-centered, you have very strong colonies, but very little honey product being produced. So you equally need plants that are balanced to ensure that both are available, such your colonies are healthy and your honey production is also enhanced.
Okay.
Sure.
That was a great question, Mr. Kalua. Yeah, that was a great question. In fact, the flip side of that question is we do need the bees to actually pollinate the crops that we eat. So the bees are very important to the ecosystem. Our next speaker is Ms. Catherine Zulu, who's the Principal Forestry Officer in Lusaka, and she'll be discussing beekeeping and honey business. Ms. Zulu, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Miyoba, for that elaborate and detailed presentation. And deliberately wanted that to be longer than this bit, which I'm going to be talking about. So I'll be talking about beekeeping and the honey business. Okay.
Ms. Zulu, just a short interruption.
Yes.
For the people that went to St. Paul's, if you can put in the chat your penta so that we know, when you graduated, and so we use that for networking. Thank you.
Okay, I'm trying to go to the next slide. I don't know, the laptop is also boycotting. I don't know, like Mr. Miyoba's that time. I don't know what's happening.
Okay, can I try to share it from this end, madam?
Okay, I'll stop sharing, then you can do that.
Okay.
You can share some honey first. We refresh, then it will work out.
No, Mr. Kalaway, I'm not sure you heard Mr. Miyoba saying you need some warm water in this morning. Yeah, that just made me laugh a little bit because Mr. Miyoba at St. Paul's, warm water was, it was quite, what's the word? It was a luxury sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was used for a lot of things, of course, for making tea and all that stuff, for, washing your face in June. Oh my God, it was quite something.
Let me share Mrs. Zulu's screen as well.
Warm water.
Okay.
Okay, so we can go to the next page.
Madam, I think
next. Okay, so my presentation outline. Okay, so I'll give a very, very brief introduction. Then I'll talk about some basic tips if you want to go into the honey business. And then the outline now will be talking about the market research. You need to acquire knowledge. You need to create a business plan. You also need to understand the regulations, and then I'll have a conclusion. Next. The next page. Okay, so I just want to say that the honey business is a very sweet business, and it is a very attractive business. And as Mr. Miyoba was saying, that it is a very complicated, art to learn. But I think when you have that interest, I think it can bring wonders into your life. So one wonders how much one can make from the honey business by selling honey, by selling beeswax. There are other byproducts of beekeeping that can be sold. Then how much does it cost to start a business? And then is honey business lucrative? I'll not go so much into the nitty-gritty of the figures, but I think I'll give you an outline of the important things that we need to have as we are thinking of the beekeeping to become a business. Next. Okay, so there are set back. Okay, next. Okay, so there are certain things that we need to put in place before we think of beekeeping to be transformed into a business. And then Mr. Miyoba was talking about setting up an apiary. Are we just going to put a few hives in our yard or in our field just for a home consumption? Or are you going to be producing the honey and the beeswax yourself, meaning you're setting up an apiary? Or are you going to be buying bulk raw honey from the producers themselves? So these are the things that would need to be thought about before you begin a business in honey. And then you also need to have motivation to produce, as Mr. Miyoba was saying, that you need to have that interest, and also to look, because people get scared that when you start handling honey, there'll be bees coming through to to sting you. But you need to have that drive. You need to know what is it that will attract bees to sting me, and what is it that will not. Then you also need to, you don't need to have a degree. You just need the knowledge. The way we're sharing this knowledge on beekeeping is just the knowledge that you need. You don't need the masters to do the honey business or the beekeeping. Next. So now I'll just give a few basic tips before you think of going into the business for honey. The first thing I think for any business is that you need to do a market research. You need to understand what is your target market. Whom are you targeting? If you are producing, let's say annually 1 bucket of honey, are you targeting the wider market? Or if you want to think of exporting honey, then it means you need to look at the product. What product are you going to be selling? Is it honey that you'll be selling? Is it needed by the market? The customers, do they need honey, by the way? Or we are just assuming that they want to take honey? So it means that you need to have a marketing strategy. You need to explain to the people why honey is important in our lives. Is it beeswax? Is it propolis? There are so many other byproducts of honey you need to be thinking about, because maybe honey will be a by the way. Your main product that will be targeting is beeswax. I'm sure if we went on Google, we should be able to see how much a beeswax is costing. But I think roughly in Zambia, we are selling it around 120, probably going up to 150 per kg. That is just a kg. So maybe if you do your calculations, you should be able to have a projection on what you can earn from selling beeswax and also honey, if that is what you want to be selling. Then what is your supply? You need to know how much a modern beehive is producing. What quantity is it going to produce? If you are going to do business, you are not going to be producing 1 bucket per year. You may want to be producing maybe several tons, maybe a ton and going upwards, or maybe even just 500 kgs for a start, because you don't want to start your business big. You want firstly to test the waters, then after that you can be growing, bit by bit. You need to identify your market as well. Is it the local customers? Is it, you need to have maybe these networks, like we are on these Rotary groups. I can easily post my product there, people will be able to be buying. You need to know where you are selling and the pricing of the product. Are you also looking at the immediate market, or you're looking at the export market? For me, I think that we need first to satisfy the local market. The export market is vast. But I also think that the local market is also vast, because people are there looking around for honey. So we need to ensure that our local market, our local demand is met before we think of exporting. But I'm sure that exporting will be more lucrative than the local market. But I think both are very lucrative. Then you also need to have an understanding of the dynamics of the honey market. We have two major flows, flows of honey, the times then when we can be able to harvest our honey. We have the major flow, which is coming up in the rainy season, starting from November going upwards, and somewhere around May, June, July, somewhere there we have a flow of honey when we can be able to harvest. So meaning, if you're thinking of honey as a business, honey production as a business, you need to be thinking about the supply. During the low honey flow period, you find that the prices of honey will be high. So meaning that even when your pricing when selling should be different as well. Then when we have the major flow, you find that the suppliers of honey are also plenty. So if you are a producer, you need to be thinking about your production costs as well as the price that you're going to be able to sell, because the prices are not like standard. It is really dynamic and it's important to understand. Let's go to the next page. Yes. Secondly, you need to acquire knowledge on beekeeping. What we're just doing when Mr. Miyoba was presenting was to give out information or knowledge. What information do we need to know about beekeeping? How do we raise bees? How do we maintain or manage an apiary? How do we process the honey, and how do we process the beeswax? But besides that, remember that if you do it manually, probably the quality will not be very good. So with equipment, then you are guaranteed that the product, the output of the honey will be in terms of a good quality. So now you need to be thinking, what sort of quality are you going to be selling? So it will also relate to the type of equipment you want for your project. Most of this honey we buy, like if you are going along the streets, they do it manually. They just use their hands, maybe they do hand scraping. So probably that's the reason why when you buy your honey, it is mixed with bees. It is also mixed with beeswax, because maybe it was overheated, and you find other debris in the honey, and you look at the color or the texture of that honey, it's not really of that standard. So you need to be thinking about the equipment that you'll be using to produce the honey, because you want high quality honey for your market, and especially for the export market. There are standards, there are grades. There's grade A, there's grade B, there's grade C, and that will also determine the pricing for the honey. And then where is the source of the materials? Are we buying these materials, the materials or the equipment? Are we buying them locally or are we buying them from abroad? And I think we need to understand this SME ministry. We need to understand what are the concessionary rates which are available for people purchasing this sort of equipment to support the SMEs. Because if you want to be into the honey business and beeswax in the beekeeping industry, it's one of those very lucrative SMEs that people can create, maybe as a cooperative or as a limited company, which you can benefit from what government is offering. Then you need to have a great knowledge about the industry. Where is it that you can sell? There are so many things I think I've already talked about it, which is relating to the industry, the pricing, the quality, and all that. And then it's always important to join, such as this meeting which we have here, this Zoom meeting. Join beekeeping groups, learn from others so that you acquire more and more knowledge. You know, in knowledge acquisition, the sky is the limit. I don't know, they say the sky is not even the limit. You can go on and on. And next page. So now, as you are thinking of doing beekeeping as a business, you need to plan, because they say failing to plan, if you don't plan, it means you are planning to fail. So if you are thinking of it as a business, which is going to grow, you need to have a written document. Even if it's handwritten, if you are just beginning, maybe the first year you're going to produce only maybe 40 liters of honey, you need to have the maths correct. How much are you putting in and how much is it that you're going to get out? So you need to visit people who can be able to do a document for you. And if you are thinking of it being a commercial entity, you need to have a proper document, a business plan, because this is a document which will tell you, which will give a description of the product that you want to sell, and then what is your target market, and how do you intend to brand your product, where do you want to sell, and it will give a description of your competitors. Remember that each and every person nowadays want to be selling honey. I'm sure people see people with honey either in a basket or in a, you know, just by the roadside. Remember that there are a lot of competitors. Now you need to do a detailed analysis of what are these characteristics that would distinguish me who be selling honey and from my competitors. You need to analyze. And then the financials. You need to have the financials in your business plan. What are the equipment? What are the costs? And what will be the returns if we are thinking of going commercial? But if it's a small business, again, you need to understand, I sell honey, I do my financials, I have a template on Excel. I need to put in, if I buy 20 buckets of honey, I need to cost all those expenditures. And then what is it that I'm making? So what I do is every month, I summarize what I've sold in that month. And then there's another important bit is what is this PACRA? You need to pay your returns to ZRA, because if you don't, you cannot even access a loan from the bank. You have to be compliant in all aspects. Next. So this is just a visual of what a business plan is like. So you need to have a marketing plan. How are you going to market? I've already talked about it. But before that, you also need to have the vision. What is your goal? What is your the objective of your business? Is it just to sell honey? But I think for me, it's to make profit. That's why I'm doing that honey business. And then you need to understand where you are breaking even. With honey business, because you stockpile your honey, you find that after you've bought or you've produced from your apiary, in the first few months, you may be in the negatives in terms of the profit, but eventually you should be able to break even if you do your calculations properly. I already talked about the financials, the income, and the expenditures. So this is purely a business that we are looking at, but even if it is at a small scale, let's make sure that we know, are we making a profit? Because even tomato business, selling tomatoes by the gate, I need to understand, am I making a profit or am I making a loss? If I'm making a loss, what is it that I'm doing wrong so that I do it right and then be able to make a profit? Next. Okay, so one of the materials which is very critical when you are thinking of doing beekeeping as a business is the packaging. If you go in the streets, you find all sorts of packaging. You find used water bottles for Manzi, use it for Vatra. That's where they are packing. But do I want to pack my honey in those packages? No, I don't think so, because the customer wants a clean container. The packaging should be presentable. And when you have loaded your honey, as you can see, it is clean. So we need to be thinking about this. Sometimes we think it's not very important. Maybe you also put a little bit of a brand. I wish I put my brand of honey here. You see how I've packaged it and how I've labeled it. Maybe I can post it later. But I do that. I do it like, I carry my honey in the vehicle, but it is branded because I want people to be attracted just by the outlook of the product. They will be attracted. I can assure you, if you do that, it needs to be done. Next. So I was talking about Pakra ZRA. We need to understand, if you want to get into the honey business, whether it's at a small scale or it's at a commercial level, we need to think about the regulations in the honey business. The first thing is you need to register a company. I'm sure we are all conversant with the process of registering a company. A ZRA, we need to be compliant. Even if I sell one container in that month, there is a threshold. We need to understand, maybe you are supposed to submit maybe 0 returns. I think it is always important to give, because these are the things that will back you up if you want to get or access loans, or if you want to get these CDF funds which are being given. You need to be compliant with most of these rules and regulations of doing business in the country. And of importance is the health compliance. If you go to the local authority, they do give out health certificates. Actually, mine has just expired, so I need to go to the local authority and renew my health certificate, because you're handling food and you need to be health compliant, and people need to have that confidence that the food that you are dealing in is hygienic. Then you need probably a trading license. Obviously, go to the local authority, or if you've gone to Pakra, you've established a company, that is well and good. And what I do with my honey, I'm not marketing, but I'm just giving a typical example, is once in a while, I take it to ZABS so that they can just certify, has it got any diseases? In case somebody bought my honey and they have a running tummy, they say it's because of this honey. I have that ZABS certificate or a ZABS whatever test results, which will show that at least I take my honey there for testing. So I think it's always important. Some of these things, we normally ignore them and we think they're not important, but I think once in a while, it's better to ensure that you have your honey tested, your product tested, even other products. And then look at the SME guidelines. What is it that we can tap from? We are looking at a business. We want to be making profits. We need to understand, what is ZDA offering to the honey business, to the cooperatives who want to start producing. Maybe the Rotary Club will want to set up a big cooperative just producing honey. What are the guidelines which are there? What is it that we can benefit from? So I think it's always important. Even as an individual, we need to understand what guidelines are there that will help us grow our business. Okay, we'll go to the next, maybe it's the last one. So I am now concluding. I think it's always important to plan. It's very, very important to plan, to set up an apiary, to plan how to produce good quality honey, and to plan how you're going to manage your apiary, but also to plan how this honey business is going to run. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Zulu, for that very informative presentation. I really enjoyed it. And I also have some questions, but as usual, I think we'll give chance to others to go first. Anybody has a question for either Mr. Miyoba or Ms. Zulu?
I do.
Sure.
So first of all, Mr. Miyoba, you mentioned that it's a good idea to have flowering plants planted for all year, and then make sure that the mixture is the right mixture for to be able to supply the nectar and the pollen for the bees. would you be kind enough maybe to send us a list of the plants that we should be thinking about that would flower all year round, especially indigenous to Zambia? Then my other question is for Ms. Zulu. Thank you so much both for a very, very wonderful presentation. Ms. Zulu, would you be kind enough to give an idea of the profitability of the honey business, just roughly? I know it's a range, it also depends on how well somebody's doing the business, but you know, what's your information from the ground? Roughly, is it, you know, 50%, 10? What are the margins like? Given the range, that would be appropriate, obviously.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. When it comes to flowering plants, we encourage as much as possible, you know, these various plants have different nutrients. So it would be a bit difficult to actually specify to say you need to have this and this particular type of species growing in an area. All we normally encourage is we know to say if you're managing the bees in a natural Miyoba woodland, the different plants have a different length of flowering period. So we also need to take an interest in just monitoring how your plants are, at what point do they start flowering, what point to the end. So as the variety should actually be there. So it is a bit difficult to really tell, to specify, to say you need to have this and this particular species. The bigger the variety, the better, because that even adds more nutrition. Like Mrs. Zulu was earlier saying, if you're going to harvest honey in June, for example, you notice to say it's more goldish in color. It's lighter because there are very few flowering plants that particular time of the year. If you're going to harvest your honey in December, it's much darker because the bees collect their pollen and nectar from a variety of species. And other scientists have actually argued to say the December honey is more nutritious, but that is a subject for debate.
Thank you very much. Maybe one more follow-up before Ms. Milimo comes in. Based on the modern hives, how much yield would one expect? And again, I know that that would differ based on the management, but roughly what's the range? You know, should I expect 20 kgs of honey, 5? What, you know, what is the upper and the lower limit?
Okay, I'll try to take that one from Mrs. Zulu comes in. Depending on the type of hives you're using. For the frame hives, we've got 2 types. In fact, I think we have about, is it 3 or 4? We have the top bar hives, which are about a meter in terms of length and 50 centimeters width. Average production, if you're using that particular type, we call them Kenyan or Tanzanian top bar hives. Average yields per hive in a good season, assuming all is well, the plants are okay, the flowering is okay, somewhere around 15, 20 kgs can do. I would say 20 as the upper, the lower around 15 kgs thereabout. That is in a good season. But with the fluctuation in the seasons, would say rough average, I would put about 15 kgs that should be able to harvest in a top bar hive. But if you're using full frame hives, which are slightly smaller than top bar hives, of course, the production tends to go down.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of profitability from the honey business, it is dependent on many aspects. Are you buying from suppliers? Maybe they're coming from Northwestern Province. Are they bringing to your place? But roughly, you don't expect to have less than 40 to 50% profitability, according to my calculations. I think it's rare that you go into a loss unless maybe you have produced poor quality honey and people are not buying and you're forced to reduce the prices, but basically 40 to 50%.
Awesome.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby, for that question. We have a question from, we have a hand up by Mr. Petin. Alec, go ahead, and then next will be Mr. Lumba. He has a question as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator or Professor. My question is goes to Ms. Zulu. I wanted to find out what type of, or what could be the minimum capital that I should prepare if I wanted to go into beekeeping right away. And then there is a second one, which goes to any of the two presenters. Do the Ministry of Agriculture provide backstopping services in case I get into the business? Can I run to the Ministry of Agriculture to be assisted and in what ways? And the last one, where do we access these materials like beehives and is it those machines for extracting honey from the beehives? Those are the three questions I had.
Thank you. Maybe I can, before Mr. Zulu comes in, let me pick the last two. You see, we have seen an interest, quite all right. I mean, knowledge is everywhere. And I've also, as a department, we've noticed, I think agriculture seems to be taking an upper hand in beekeeping. But I would say, I think the forestry department, I would say it's more suitable in terms of knowledge as it relates to beekeeping, because we have had challenges really with the knowledge availed. But if the agriculture department is promoting beekeeping in a particular area, take an interest to inquire where the nearest forest office is. I'm sure I'll be able to get more information on how to go about the beekeeping activities. As for the beehives, the officers in your respective district, you know, with beehives, this like any carpenter can make them, provided you give them the sample. A good carpenter should be able to make the hives without any serious challenges. When it comes to the equipment, and much of the protective clothing and all the other equipment, there I would say you need to engage the forestry department in your particular district. They'll be able to link you to farmers, because on the copper belt, for example, we have, we're able to get your beekeeping equipment from Zambia Forestry College. I think they have a unit that is making those now. We're able to get beehives equal from the same, including smokers, equal in Mpongwe. We have Mpongwe Farmers Association. We've trained them at least able to produce that. So on the copper belt, at least we have a few places, but try to engage the district forest office in your respective district. I think Mr. Zulu can pick up the other questions.
Thank you so much. I think earlier I did mention that we not go into the nitty-gritties of the calculations, but what we'll do is we will prepare some figures that you require, like a minimum investment, let's say to set up an apiary with 10 hives. I think we should be able to share either on the platform so that people can have that information. I think we didn't prepare that, but I think we shall do that so that we can be able to give an idea. Then on whether agriculture, we can run to agriculture. I think the discussion has been that they consider bees as a livestock. So that's why now you see they're also talking about beekeeping. But in most cases, they make use of the district forestry staff. And I'm sure most of the training should have come from the forestry department, because we are not mean. We can train any people or any group of people who are interested in knowing or learning about beekeeping. And I think, as it was put rightly, the best place to go to is the forestry department, because we have the expertise to be able to explain what is happening, to backstop in case you're having any challenges. I think that's what I can say. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Mr. Lambama, you had a question.
Sorry. Good afternoon, Mr. Miyoba, and good afternoon, Ms. Catherine. I had put it in the chat because I think us who grew up in the village or in the farms, there was a season that was encouraged to harvest, and there was a season that is not really, you don't find enough. I think even just the nature one. So is there a season that really is there for you to do a good harvest?
Thank you for that question. Indeed, there is a season. You don't just harvest anyhow. You see, when we talked of bees need flowers for them to produce the honey nectar. So you target that particular time, like for example, June, July, there's a bit of flowering that is taking place. No wonder we have the minor honey flow. Again, starting November, December, thereabout, we have a major honey flow. During this particular time of the year, the flowering is at its peak. even as you harvest as we get the honey from the hives, the bees will not starve. They will not have that lack of food availability in the area, hence reducing or absconding. Because if you're going to harvest during the time when the flowering is low, the moment you get the honey out of the hive, the bees will have nothing to fall on, and they'll definitely abscond. They'll leave your hives. So we target those seasons when the flowering is at its peak, so that even after getting your honey, the bees will still have a source of food for them to continue. Hence, they'll continue to stay in the hive.
Maybe I can just make a little bit of an addition. Yes, we have the major honey flow somewhere around November, December going up there. But I think my observation, I'm sure Mr. Miyoba can attest to that, is that, you know, we are now facing these issues to do with climate variability, maybe too much heat and low rainfall. You find that even in the main honey flow period, that particular year, you find that the supply is poor. So I think it's something that is subject to be researched on to see whether there's an effect of, you know, climate change on the bees, you know, activity. So I think that's just an observation. Just wanted to bring that to light. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those responses. So earlier on in the presentation, we were told that most indigenous production is in the Northwestern province. So I want to know why, because I have an uncle in Lusaka that can only get honey from, those of you familiar with Luapula Valley, there's a junction in Bereshi Junction, you know, the road that goes to Coamba. People bring the honey at that Bereshi Junction. So this guy in Lusaka, he sends bus drivers like Power Tools and, you know, whoever is going that side to bring him honey in those 2.5 liter bibudiza, you know. And he can only use that honey. He doesn't want to go to like ShowPrite or these other places to buy processed honey. So I think there is also production in Luapula province, if that's an anecdote to add. But why is Northwestern province particularly the one that produces the most? And what can other provinces learn from that?
Okay, thank you. You will notice one thing about Northwestern province. I think from our observation, the chiefs in Northwestern have been, of course, in the past, were quite very strict when it comes to cutting down of trees. And you notice that Northwestern was one of the provinces that was least industrialized. So much of the land was actually covered in vegetation. It's now with the opening up of the mines, and maybe I can bring this to the attention of the group. I think Northwestern was one of the provinces in this country which was certified to produce organic honey by, of course, the European standards, where they said, because they argue to say there's well to industrial activity. And unfortunately, when we opened up the mines, that certification has actually been withdrawn, because their argument is because of the oxides that are produced in the mines, they find their way into the plants. Ultimately, they find their way into their honey, but that's the subject of debate. So that was in the past. Those statistics I was giving were mainly in the past. But of late, we've actually noticed to say there's an increase. There's an interest in other areas coming up. So really at the present moment, to stick by the rule of thumb to say Northwestern is leading, it is leading, but I think honey is being produced everywhere. And we're actually encouraging to say, let honey be produced anywhere, because like we said, the benefits that come by virtue of engaging in beekeeping, an increase in environmental management, an increase, a reduction in the rate of deforestation, a reduction in the loss of vegetative cover. So if we can introduce beekeeping in almost all areas of the country, we are home and dry, then we are trying to promote this as an economic venture.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Before people jump in, you guys can ask some questions. We have 3 more minutes, but I'll just share a little story. So when I was growing up as a kid in Mansa, our neighbor, like I told Ms. Zulu last time, Mr. Chanda, used to work for Forestry department, and he had this green Land Rover with a badge in front of it that says FD. So that was very attractive to me. I always thought I should be a forester myself. So that was really nice. But then behind our house, there was another family that had a beehive in a tree trunk that had fallen. And my kid brother and his friends, they went and disturbed that thing, and then they ran into the market. There's a market, the big market in Kuma suburb. And these bees just went into the market and destabilized everybody's business for the day. And that was something that we'll always remember way back. So using that as an example, can people make actually beehives at their house? Is that allowed?
Okay, thank you for that. Truth be told, we discourage that as much as possible. Bees are vicious. Bees kill. I've witnessed, like Samson has explained, where people have actually died. In my years of service, there was a farmer in Kitwe. We actually went to harvest. It was a bit argumentative. He went smoking. The moment we opened 2 beehives, he lost 3 sheep, 5 goats, 2 cattle, and 6 dogs. Himself had to be resuscitated from Kitwe General Hospital because the stings were just too many. So we don't encourage keeping of hives in a residential area. They are vicious, and we really have to manage them, especially if you disturb them in the hot season. They are quite something else, and people have actually died.
Interesting.
Professor, I
Yes,
have a
yes.
question.
Yes, yes.
Mr. Miyoba, is there a number of beehives we can keep, say, in a square kilometer or a square 1 hectare or whatever? Is there some rule to that? Thank you.
Thank you. What determines the number of hives in your area is the vegetation that you have, because we cannot keep 50 hives in an area that is poorly vegetated. So if you are managing, if your area is well vegetated, enough flowering plants, enough availability of water, you can keep as many hives as you want. But also what we're looking at is we don't want to create unnecessary pressure for the bees. So really it goes, I would say it goes with vegetation that you have around, and also what are your management skills? Like Mrs. Zulu had said, you need to have this skill, the skill base, the knowledge. So when you are starting, you start with a smaller number so that you learn, you're able to manage them well. As you build up your skills and your area is well vegetated, your area has got enough water, your area is secure, you can actually increase the number of hives. And when it comes to apiary settings, you have an option. You can either manage your hives in a standard apiary, which is about a 20 by 20 meter apiary, if you so wish, or you may just spread your hives over a particular hectare of land. Then you have to go around. So it actually comes down to a management style that you want to use in that particular area. Like Mrs. Zulu had earlier alluded to in the business plan, you need to know what you want to produce. How do you want, so if you're going to produce at a larger scale, even the aspect of the way your apiaries are laid out matters, because that may be a cost on your business. Because if you're going to have hives scattered across a 1 hectare piece of land from one corner to the other, for you to go around inspecting your hives, that is a cost. So you may opt to have your hives localized in certain areas. So you put up a 20 by 20 meter apiary, you have a number of hives in there. You have another 20 by 20 meter, you have another apiary set up there. So it really goes with management style. But the largest part I would say is how good is the vegetation in that particular area. And you may also need to do an assessment of the availability of bees within a particular area, because you may have the vegetation, you may not have the bees in that area. So you need to take an interest to just do a survey, to do an assessment. Does your area actually have enough swarms to supply the occupants of your hives?
Awesome.
That's a serious one.
I know this is yes, it's a lot of information. It's very interesting presentation here. Can we take one more question? I noticed Dr. Mukamba, you came in later. Do you have any questions, or did you understand what was going on here with these presentations? And Mr. Momba, you came in a bit later. Did you enjoy yourself?
This is Mukamba.
Yes, Doc.
Hot on what was going on, though I was a bit late, but I think I've gotten the grist, listening to the second part of the presentation, I think I've got an idea what is to be done. However, I must say it's a no-go area for me. I'm full of allergies, and one sting one time caused me so much trouble. I stay away. I admire those who can do it. I enjoy the honey, though. I'll support it.
No, Mr. Mkamba, I'll tell you one thing. Sorry, just come in. What I would encourage you to do is this. Occasionally, that sting, the body adjusts. So when I know you may react badly, but just take an interest, try to expose yourself. I even had the same challenge when I started, I think in 2002. The first time I was standing by bees, I think it was the hospital case. I had to be resuscitated from the hospital. But over time, with continued exposure, this time actually I don't get any swellings. So my encouragement to you is don't give up. Just try to take it a step at a time. You realize your allergies will actually, because your body will adjust. The most things you get, your body tends to adjust, and you actually reduce on the swelling. That applies to everyone else who's interested in beekeeping. Let us not run away from the bees.
Yeah, I like that bit to say the more you get stung, you get so immune. But I think still a lot of precaution will need to be taken because some people react really terribly, others even faint. So if you are allergic to the sting of bees or just to taking honey, I think the best thing is to just take the necessary precautions. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so last but not least, Ms. Zulu, can you talk about fake honey that causes problems on the market?
Yes, fake honey. That can be classified in different ways. There is honey on the market, which they mix, I think, with some sugar syrup, so that they just have that flavor of honey. And then they've added a bit of sugar syrup, or is it the syrup itself? And then they'll be selling it. And you find that maybe other people don't even take syrup because maybe it is too high in these artificial sweeteners, and they end up reacting. Then the other fake honey can be categorized as the poorly processed honey, where you find that you are eating the honey, there's even wax in that honey. And I think most people react to, taking wax into the stomach. So I think we need to be very cautious. I'm not sure what other things. I'm sure other people, I'm told they put molasses, they mix it with honey. So there's that scent of honey, but they've added molasses, and then they sell it to you as pure and natural honey. So I think it is a skill also to identify which is genuine honey on the market and which is not genuine. Sometimes even just the scent that comes out, you can tell this honey is fermented. It smells like, I don't know how many people have taken cachaça. I'm not sure, Professor, whether you've taken some cachaça before. That smell, that scent that comes out of there, you can literally smell it from the honey. It smells like a wine. So you can tell that that honey is not very good for you. So I think it's also a skill to identify which honey is genuine and which one is not. People can ask, we can be able to explain on that. Thank you.
Maybe just another addition. You also notice, I think like Mrs. Zura said, we have a bit of a challenge. When people are selling honey, and you notice to say, like if you're driving between Kapiri and Kawood, you will notice that most of the time, the honey is kept in the sun. That is also a strategy. When they add water to the honey, you add water to the raw honey, then you boil it. They'll try to keep it as warm as possible to avoid that separation that takes place. That's the honey you find when you put it in the shed or in the fridge, the water, the pollen is actually able to separate. Now, I'll give you another simple trick that I use when I go to buy honey. When you go in a shop and you get a bottle of honey, try to tilt the bottle. Let me just try to switch on my camera. Just try to explain something. When you get into the shop, if this is your bottle of honey, for example, you get it, hold it against the light and try to tilt it like that. If it flows like water, it tells you to say the honey that you are getting, the quality is not good. Honey should be jelly. That is the good part. Then again, when you hold it against the light, if there are any impurities in the honey, like Mrs. Zulu alluded to, you'll be able to detect. But of course, it requires a bit of skill just to be able to tell. So the only thing I can advise is let's get honey from, let's avoid buying honey from the streets. It doesn't do good, it's sort of good. We have people that are able to say, to give good quality, like Mrs. Zulu had said, try to get from a reputable institution, preferably honey that is certified, because this is a force that we safeguard ourselves from taking any impurities that may actually react. And in conclusion, honey actually, when stored, when you get a bottle, keep it in your fridge over time. It should be able to crystallize. If your honey is going to stay liquid 2, 3, 4, 5 months down the line, that tells you to say your honey, the quality of your honey is questionable. Over time, honey should be able to crystallize because of the sugar content. But once the moisture content is high, it will be liquid, and all that will happen is it will separate. The water will be on its own, the honey will be on its own. If there's any pollen, it will separate. That you can actually tell. That's the beauty with honey.
Very, very interesting. Well, I think we've come up at the end of our recording here, but speaking about fake honey, there is actually a country in the world that produces a lot of fake honey, and I was watching a documentary of them, shipping honey to the States, to Europe, to Africa, and yeah, without those skills that you just spoke about, Mr. Miyoba, of knowing, the quality, I think most of us have taken that, fake honey, I think. And to answer Ms. Zulu directly, if I've tested cachasu, I think I have. I don't know if I swallowed it. I'm sure I did. I had an uncle, Vashkulu Vachipembo, not an uncle, grandfather that was always drinking the first bottle of cachasu. And obviously, his grandfather, nice to me. I tried it. You should try it too one day.
No.
Cool. Anyway, so we've come up the end of our discussion today. So the discussion was on honey production, management, business, and all the byproducts that come out of honey as a product itself. And once again, very nice presentations from Mr. Milimo Miyoba, who's a forestry technician in Masaiti, and Ms. Catherine Zulu, who's a principal forestry officer in Lusaka. To the two of you, we really thank you and appreciate your services to us as an alumni group and friends, and also to the country. What you're doing is invaluable work, and we hope this knowledge keeps spreading as much as possible, so that most people can actually get into these things and we become food self-sufficient. To the members that came today, thank you so much for spending another Friday afternoon with the St. Paul Speaker Series. The next one is in 4 weeks, so please stay tuned. And we're going to stop the recording now, but if you want to stick around for chit-chatting, that's also fine. So thank you so much, Ms. Zulu and Mr. Miyoba, and have a good weekend.
May we have the contact details of both? Sorry.
Yes. I can send you I'll send you the contact details for both of them. In fact, Ms. Zulu said she was going to send some, I wrote it down, the figures on
like 10 boxes or something, 10
exactly. Yeah. The return on investment, that's what it was.
And also, if they don't mind sharing their presentation, this is very, very interesting. And then with the contact details, we can reach out offline.
Okay, you mean the video or the actual PowerPoint?
The actual PowerPoint, please.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Both.
Yeah, we do that.
Thank you. And the video, of course, Musonda.
Oh yeah, that's coming in. Give me an hour, I'll edit it. Cool. Well, thank you so much, friends, and Friday in Jakarta. And yeah, let's go and yeah.